The April 17th, 2023 Arlington County Board of Zoning Appeals is now in session. Good evening and welcome. I am Richard Kaplan, Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The board is made up of 5 citizens appointed by the Circuit Court. Tonight, in addition to myself, we have Judy Freshman and Portia Clark. Also present is the professional staff, including Blake Bowen, Board of Zoning Appeals Coordinator, Brett Goldberg, BZA Associate Planner, and hopefully Stephen Rissy, Prim Supervisor. We thank you for being here and extend a warm welcome. To avoid disruptions, we ask that you please place your mobile devices in silent mode. Before we begin tonight's hearing, I will discuss this board's powers and the procedures for tonight's hearing. The board's powers are prescribed in the Code of Virginia and are set out in further detail in the county's zoning ordinance adopted by the county board. The Board of Zoning Appeals does not have the power to rezone property or to amend the regulations set forth in the ordinance. The authority rests with the county board. This board does have the authority to do 3 things. First, the BZA can approve use permits that allow modifications of placement requirements for structures on 1- and 2-family lots where there is no option in the zoning ordinance to allow such modifications. In order to approve a use permit, the Arlington zoning ordinance requires that this board find that the proposal will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing in the neighborhood, will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood, and will not be in conflict with the purposes of the master plans and land use and zoning related policies of the county. In making these findings, the BZA shall consider whether the modification will promote compatibility of the development with the surrounding neighborhood because of the structure's overall size, footprint, and placement are similar to those of structures on the property surrounding the lot in question, and whether the modification will help preserve natural landform, historical features, and/or significant trees or foliage. When approving use permits, the Board of Zoning Appeals may impose conditions that it deems necessary and in the public interest, including but not limited to the duration of the use permit. This board does not have authority to grant use permits to modify requirements for expanding housing option developments. Second, the BZA can grant variances from the specific requirements of the zoning ordinance. When granting variances, the burden of proof is on the applicant by a preponderance of the evidence that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, and the need for a variance would not be shared generally by other properties, and such variance is not contrary to the purposes of the ordinance, or that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or that not granting the variance would alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition relating to the property or improvements thereon at the time of the effective date of the ordinance, or alleviate a hardship by granting a reasonable modification to a property or improvement requested by or on behalf of a person with a disability. In all variance cases, the property for which the variance is being requested was acquired in good faith, and any hardship was not created by the applicant. That the variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent properties and nearby properties in the proximity of the geographic area. That the condition or situation of the property concerned is not of so general or reoccurring in nature as to make reasonably practical the adoption of an amendment to the ordinance. The granting of the variance will not result in a use that is not otherwise permitted on the property or change the zoning classification of the property, and that the relief or remedy obtained through the variance is not available through a special exception process provided for under the zoning or subdivision ordinance. Third, the BZA can decide appeals of decisions of the zoning administrator. When deciding appeals of the zoning administrator, the board must use its judgment to determine if the administrator was correct. Now on to tonight's hybrid hearing. For those participating in person, on the front table, you will find a QR code linking to a copy of the application package, including the staff report for each case before us this evening. For those participating virtually, a copy of each application package can be found on the Arlington BZA website. There is also a link in the chat for the application packages. I recommend that if you have not yet seen the report for your case, that you review that report before your case is called. If you are attending virtually and lose connectivity, please reconnect with us by phone. If you are attending via Teams, Please keep yourself muted and cameras off until called upon. Turn off the sound on any other devices around you to minimize interference. When called upon to speak, please turn on your camera and unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located in the meeting command bar. County staff does not have the ability to unmute you. The meeting chat is active for technical support assistance only. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion, public comments, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. Public comments must be shared verbally or have been previously provided in writing for the record during the assigned public testimony period. This evening, staff will call each case and will provide a brief report and recommendation. Next, board members will ask any questions of staff that they may have. Applicants or their representative will be given an opportunity to make comments to support the application or appeal. Next, all speakers for the item will be called. Speakers must fill out a speaker slip online or is available on the table in the front of the room. After we hear from speakers for or against the proposal, the board may permit the applicant a brief opportunity to clarify any points. The board may ask questions of any speakers, but does not permit any cross-examination or direct questioning by others. For tonight's hearing, this board has deemed the following time limits for speakers to be sufficient: 20 minutes for applicants of appeals, 5 minutes for applicants of use permits or variances. We have deemed 3 minutes for representatives of organizations and 2 minutes for individuals as sufficient. After the board has gathered all the information we need and have discussed the case, we will decide the matter by voting on a motion duly made and seconded. A majority of this board is needed to approve any motion. Please be respectful of the time allotted. This is a public forum, and tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted on the county's website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether spoken or written, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. Any appeal from the decision of this board must be made to the circuit court in accordance with state law. After your case of interest is heard, you are welcome to stay for the balance of the session or leave at your convenience. Mr. Bowen, I haven't looked online. Do we have any members participating remotely?
Mr. Chair, I believe that Intimalis was possibly attending virtually, but that
we
may
don't
not
see
be the
her
case. I have not seen her online at the moment.
Okay. Before we start, I would just want to note for the record that we have 3 members present, which is a quorum for the BZA. So I'd like to note that because we have 3 members present, in order to approve a variance or a use permit tonight, Virginia law requires a majority of the membership of the board, not those present. So tonight, that means that for anything to be approved, all 3 of us have to agree and vote yes. Next, we have a couple items on the consent agenda for tonight's hearing. For the public's benefit, the consent agenda is used by this board to quickly decide on agenda items that are complete and non-controversial. An item can be removed from the consent agenda at any time by a board member or will be removed from the consent agenda if a member of the public desires to comment on the case, either for or against. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the listed cases?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, I will read the case number for each case as well as the case description. The first case included in the group motion of approval is case number V-11931-23-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Eugene and Yesun Kim, the owners, to permit a street setback of 15.5 feet to the rear addition, 14.5 feet to the addition eaves, instead of 25 feet to the rear addition, 21 feet to the addition eaves as required from First Place South, and to permit a left side setback of 4.5 feet to the rear addition, 3.5 feet to the addition eaves, instead of 8 feet to the rear addition, 5 feet to the addition eaves as required, regarding a 2-story rear addition to an existing 1-family detached dwelling on a corner lot in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 100 South Barton Street within the Penrose Civic Association. The second case is case number V-11935-24-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Charles and Hillary Moore, the owners, to permit a street setback of 15.1 feet to the step instead of 25 feet to the step as required, and to permit a street setback of 16.1 feet to the porch, 15.4 feet to the porch eave instead of 21 feet to the porch, 19.5 feet to the porch eaves as required, all from South Taylor Street, regarding a front porch addition with stairs exceeding 35% of the width of the building elevation to an existing 1-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 629 South Taylor Street within the Barcroft Civic Association. The third and final case is case number V-11936-24-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Cook Brothers on behalf of Benjamin and Ann Adams, the owners, to permit a rear setback of 22.2 feet to the building wall instead of 25 feet to the building wall as required, to permit a rear setback of 18.8 feet to the deck instead of 21 feet to the deck as required, and to permit a left side setback of 5.5 feet to the deck instead of 6 feet to the deck as required regarding a rear addition and new rear deck with stairs to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 4841 9th Street South within the Barcroft Civic Association. The staff recommendation for all three of these use permit requests is to be approved, subject to the conditions listed.
Mr. Bowen, do we have any supplemental materials for these three cases?
To my knowledge, we have not received any supplemental material for these three cases.
And do we have any speakers signed up for any of these three cases?
To my knowledge, we do not have any speakers who have signed up to speak on these three cases.
Thank you. Do we have any people in the room or online who wish to speak for or against these three proposals? Hearing none, I will entertain motions. Ms. Freshman.
I move a group approval of V-11931-23-UP1, 11935-24-UP1, and 11936-24-UP1, subject to the conditions in the staff reports.
A second.
A motion made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark for the approval of the three listed on the screen. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. These three pass 3-0. Mr. Bowen, I believe we have three matters on the agenda that are of substantially similar items, and I would like to call those three together. They are, you don't have them, they are number 7, V-11933-23-VA-1, number 13, V-11939-23-VA-1, and number 14, V-11940-23-VA-1.
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, would you like me to read the case description for each case as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, absolutely. The first case is case number V-11933-23-VA-1. This is a variance request by Kristen McGuire, the owner, to permit a minimum distance between buildings of 10.1 feet and 16 feet instead of 20 feet as required for a multiple family residential development with multiple main buildings, and to permit a lot area of 1,500 square feet instead of 1,800 square feet as required regarding interior structural alterations to an existing nonconforming multiple family residential building, including interior renovations to remove load-bearing kitchen walls in the RA 1426 zoning district on the premises known as 3426 South Wakefield Street within the Arlington Civic Association. The second case is case number V-11939-24-VA-1. This is a variance request by Karen Morgan Lynch, the owner, to permit a minimum distance between buildings of 11.9 feet instead of 20 feet as required for a multiple family residential development with multiple main buildings, and to permit a lot area of 1,500 square feet instead of 1,800 square feet as required regarding interior structural alterations to an existing nonconforming multiple family residential building, including an interior renovation to remove load-bearing kitchen wall in the RA 1426 zoning district on the premises known as 3029 South Buchanan Street in the Arlington Civic Association. The third and final case is case number V-11940-24-VA-1. This is a variance request by Thomas Fail and Leah Connolly, the owners, to permit a minimum distance between buildings of 10.7 feet and 15.9 feet instead of 20 feet as required for a multiple family residential development with multiple main buildings, and to permit a lot area of 1,383 square feet instead of 1,800 square feet as required regarding interior structural alteration to an existing nonconforming multiple family residential building, including an interior renovation to remove a load-bearing kitchen wall in the RA 1426 zoning district on the premises known as 3075 South Abington Street in the Arlington Civic Association. The staff recommendation for all three of these variances is for approval, subject to the conditions listed.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Mr. Bowen, do we have any supplemental material for these three cases?
To my knowledge, there are no supplemental material for any of these three cases, nor are there any speakers who have
Thank
signed
you.
up in addition.
Frequent visitors to the BZA know that I don't believe a variance is appropriate in these types of cases because the Code of Virginia requires a condition of the variance to not be shared generally by other properties. However, I also don't believe it is fair to these three applicants to require a deferral of which the outcome would still render their project in question under the circumstances. As such, I plan on supporting these three variances tonight. With that being said, are there anyone in the audience or online who wishes to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, I will entertain motions. Ms. Freshman.
Case 11933-23-VA1 and case 1193923-VA1 and case 11940-23-VA-1. I move approval of all three cases, subject to the conditions in each staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I will call the roll.
Mr. Kaplan, before you call the roll, I would like to point out that I believe Ms. Freshman said for the final two cases, V11939-23-VA-1, and for the final case, V-11940-23-VA-1, whereas the number instead of 23 should have been 24 for both of those cases.
Which is because it's on the slide that way.
Thank you for noting that.
I think we all know that it reflects 24-VA-1.
Thank you.
For the record, thank you. Thanks for catching that. Motion made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. These three passes 3-0. Lastly, before we get on to the normal course of our agenda, I would like to seek unanimous consent from my colleagues to hear item 16 next on the agenda. Hearing no objections, Mr. Bowen, can you please call item 16?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, just one moment. All right, thank you. The case formally numbered as case number 16 is case number V-11942-24-UP-1, a use permit request by Morse Architects, PLLC, on behalf of Jeffrey and Amanda Beck, the owners, to permit a street setback of 24.2 feet to the building wall instead of 25 feet to the building wall as required, and to permit a street setback of 19.2 feet to the porch, 18.2 feet to the porch eave instead of 21 feet to the porch, 19.5 feet to the porch eave as required, all from First Street North, regarding a new second-story addition, new front porch, and new rear deck to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 5933 First Street North within the Boulevard Manor Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions similar to the other cases. I'm not aware of any supplemental material that's been submitted for this case, nor are there any supplemental any speakers who have signed up for the case.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Do my colleagues have any questions for staff on this item?
No.
Is the applicant with us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, thankfully you were here. Would you like to speak to your application?
Yeah, I just thank you for considering our application. My wife and I really love the neighborhood that we live in. Our daughter has made a number of friends, and our house is just getting too small as is. So we would like to be able to renovate it and stay here for significantly longer than we had originally planned. So thank you again for considering it.
Thank you. I just want to commend you on your complete application.
Thank you.
Do my colleagues have questions of this applicant? And we don't have any speakers. So, motions.
Okay. I move on the case V-11942-24-UP1. I move approval subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. A motion to grant this use permit made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. This item passes 3-0. Good luck with your project.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bowen, I think we are ready to go on to item number 1 now.
Yes, Mr. Kaplan. The case that was formerly numbered as number 1 on the agenda is case number V-11927-24-UP-1. This is a carryover item, a use permit request by Step Up Associates LLC, the owner, to permit a street setback of 14.3 feet to the building wall, 13 feet to the building eave instead of 25 feet to the building wall, 21 feet to the building eave as required from South Joy Street, to permit a street setback of 11.1 feet to the stoop eave instead of 21 feet to the stoop from the stoop eave as required from South Joy Street, to permit a right side setback of 5.9 feet to the building wall instead of 8 feet to the building wall as required, to permit a rear setback of 5 feet to the building wall, 5 feet to the building eave instead of 25 feet to the building wall, 21 feet to the building eave as required, and to permit a building separation of 7.6 feet instead of 8 feet as required regarding an after-the-fact approval for a new rear detached garage and a new one-family detached dwelling in the R5 zoning district on the premises known as 2007 South Joy Street within the Aurora Highlands Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. Please note that we have received a piece of supplemental material for this case, which is an email expressing opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Do my colleagues, Ms. Freshman?
Mr. Bowen, I appreciate that your report included the timeline permits, which I had raised before. And I'm interested in knowing at what point in this rundown the issue is, a zoning issue is raised that causes this project to come to BZA.
In this case, the applicant has been unable to secure final approval of their building permit due to the as-built non-conforming setbacks, which would also hinder them from getting a certificate of occupancy for a new dwelling. So given that they received, I believe, a wall check survey that had been rejected, which is towards the bottom of that timeline that I provided, that is when it became a BZA case. And I believe the BZA application was first submitted in January 2024.
Okay, so they had various permits, including demolition, and they constructed the structures. And the issue related to zoning didn't come up until the wall check?
Yes, demolition permits and building permits are not issued by the zoning division. They're issued by the inspection services division. So our role in that process is subsidiary to that of ISD, the inspection services division. And there's various checks, including the wall checks throughout the building permit process. And in this case, I believe it was the wall check that fundamentally triggered the need for the BZA application.
Okay, well, that's the way I interpreted this. I guess where I'm going and where I have been before is the fact that we have an application to approve a structure after the fact. It puts a lot of people in a very difficult position if they want to take the position, as I like to, that this is the sort of issue that should come up, as it has with almost every other applicant we have every meeting, before construction. So I can't, at this point, I'm not comfortable carrying out or approving this application. I understand that it's for the applicant, but I also feel as if the permitting process is such that a structure can be completely constructed before there's a red flag that says, oops, there's a problem here. I think that's a problem with our process, not necessarily with any individual applicant.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. Any further questions for staff?
No.
I guess let's hear from the applicant. In this case, the applicant's representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the BZA, for the record, I'm William B. Lawson Jr. I represent the applicant. I've got a reaction to allergies, so I hope you bear with me. I want to start off by saying that there's about half of single-family homes in Arlington that violate some part of the zoning ordinance. And this is based on a survey that was done a number of years ago. And, when a lay person is confronted with what happened, where you have a non-conforming house and you're preserving a wall because if you take it down, you lose your non-conforming status, but the wall's rotten. And so you take a 70-year-old wall, you take it out, you put up a brand new one, but you just lost your non-conformity. And I think lay people have a hard time understanding that. You all may recall that Eric Gutschall ran into this problem inside of a unit that he was doing a renovation of. And the Planning and Zoning Subcommittee of the Civic Federation and Mr. Gutschall went to the board and asked that this situation be cured. And the county board did it for interior structural alterations, but not exterior. If they'd done exterior, we would have, these cases wouldn't be in front of you. So we continue to do this strange dance with these non-conforming walls. Usually when I get one of these cases, either the contractor or the subcontractor, looks at the wall and they say, well, this is crazy. We're just going to tear it out, put a new one. A different situation arose here. And what happened in this case is that the foundation was not high enough off of the ground. And so you bump into the building code. And the building code says if it's not pressure treated, and if it's, I forget the other criteria, but you can't take untreated wood and have it under 8 inches close to the ground. So we would have had to take that wall out, and that's required by law. And I think in the zoning ordinance, there is an exception for structural alterations when required by law. And the cases that I referenced where the contractor takes it out because it's, rotten or whatever, that to me, that's a discretionary thing. And that's distinguishable from this situation where the building code required that the foundation be raised. So if he wanted to save that wall, he probably couldn't have anyway. Let's see. So we end up. Now we filed for the use permit, and I'm not going to repeat the staff's analysis. They look at things like neighboring properties and setbacks and so forth, and they've indicated why they recommend approval. What I did is I prepared a memorandum, and he can tell you that I was partially cross-examined him because I had a very difficult time figuring out how did this happen. But after his patience and my questioning him, we figured out that for some reason they required a demo permit, and the demo permit indicated you could take the whole house down. And the building permit did not have a note usually associated where it says, don't take those walls down. There was some language, we have to admit, elsewhere in the plans that indicated it should be saved. So I know there's an informal test. Was this in good faith? And this is not somebody who decided, well, the hell with it, I'm just going to take the wall out and I'll seek forgiveness later. There is a supplemental letter that Mr. Giacobbe submitted. And if his facts were accurate, I would agree with him. But I think that his premise that this was done on purpose is erroneous. And the last thing that I will share with you on page 9, there's a note that the demo permit required removing the existing walls and replacing them with new. We spent about 45 minutes looking over that, and we could not find that. I'm not saying it's not there, but we couldn't find it. That's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lawson? Mr. Bowen, quick question that you may or may not be able to answer, and it's likely in the staff report. If nothing had went wrong here and this, and the wall was reusable, would we be here today?
I'm hesitant to answer that on the spot. I can look into it a little bit for you. I
I'm not
believe
sure at
the
all.
fundamental issue here is that the first floor walls were demolished, and therefore you cannot build over existing new, or you can, the zone, excuse me, I'll back up a little bit. Article 16 of the zoning ordinance governing nonconformities allows you to build over existing nonconforming walls by right, provided that they are not a porch wall or a garage wall.
Right.
I believe the issue we have here is that the first floor walls were demolished and then rebuilt over. So because they are new walls, that is a fundamental reason we are here today.
And so I don't know that I need an answer to my question because we need a unanimous board tonight. So let me discussion with the board and then I'll, if it matters, I will get back to you
Thank you.
for an answer to that. So I guess, Ms. Freshman, has your position that you stated changed?
This is a use permit.
This is a use permit.
I thought you said for variance, we needed 3.
No, for both use permits and variances, the Code of Virginia requires 3, a majority of the membership of the board, not just those present. So we need a unanimous board tonight to pass any use permit or variance. And I've checked with our counsel on that. So if your position has not changed, then my recommendation, if you were amenable to it, would be to defer until we have our full board to decide this matter.
I'd prefer that as opposed to having to vote my conscience.
Ms. Clark, are you amenable to that?
I would agree.
So I can defer my question, Mr. Bowen, until May. So seeing as how that is the better alternative, and I don't have to come to a yes or no on this one. I guess I can make the motion for deferral. So I will move. Mr. Bowen, when's our May meeting?
I believe it's May 15th. Let me do a quick check on that. Yeah, May 15th.
So I will move to defer this V-11927-24-UP-1 to our May BZA, May 15th BZA hearing.
Second.
A motion to defer made by me, seconded by Ms. Freshman. I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman,
Aye.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Motion to defer has passed 3-0. Thank you. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the next item?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan. Sorry, I've lost my place with a few shuffling of
Sorry.
faces. Yeah,
Item
no worries.
number 2.
Thanks. That is case number V-11928-23-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Skylar Aarons on behalf of Prime Custom Homes LLC, the owner, to permit a street setback of 10.5 feet to the area way, 12.6 feet to the window well, 12.2 feet to the detention tank, 15.3 feet to the porch, 13.7 feet to the porch eave instead of 21 feet to the area window well, detention tank, and porch, 19.5 feet to the porch eave as required, and to permit a street setback of 14.9 feet to the building wall, 13.7 feet to the building eave instead of 25 feet to the building wall, 21 feet to the building eave as required, all from North Edison Street, regarding a new one-family detached dwelling on a corner lot in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 5017 17th Street North within the Waycroft Woodlawn Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. Please note that we have a piece of supplemental material for this for this case, which includes signatures of support on a petition. I will note that this was actually received on time. It just ended up in my quarantine folder in my email, so it ended up as supplemental material.
Excellent. We have a record low of supplemental if that's the case, right? Any questions for staff on this item? Would you like to speak to your application?
Good evening. My name is Skylar Aarons. Thank you to the board, as always, for the opportunity to present this case. I realize you folks get this information a little bit in advance and see some of the background information. So I won't dive into every little aspect, but the property in question is a separate lot from the adjacent property to the right. It was going to be developed separately. I believe the first property has already been developed. It's approved. And so this property to the left is a little bit substandard. I believe it's less than 6,000 square feet. So it's just got a little bit less land on it than you would normally typically require for an R6 zone property. We are requesting, it's got a little bit going on this one. It's kind of got roads on all three sides. And there is an easement that was discovered. Well, I'm sorry, a sewer that was discovered in the front yard that you might see on the plat there. I don't believe there was a marked easement on that property. There's not. And yeah, so the owner is working with the county to grant them an easement on that property. Between the subs, I'm sorry,
on the plat, can I assume that that's that gray line going from?
Correct, yes.
Like the snake? Okay.
Yeah. So just as you can tell, a lot going on, substandard lot, easement running through the front. So it kind of put quite a bit of restriction on here. I will say that the design that came up with was a pretty good design. It fits for the most part. It's conforming on the front, the rear, and the right side, I believe. So more or less, we're just requesting along that left, that second, or I guess first, second, or third front side, but I guess it would be the second front side on North Edison Street. So basically, that's the biggest encroachment there. We did get support from everyone, and we do appreciate. I think someone from the BZA gave us a nudge because we had forgotten to get that submitted. So we were able to get that support from a majority of folks. I believe one neighbor did have some concerns across the street about runoff and trees and stuff like that. I didn't personally get a chance to speak with them, but as you folks are aware, this is only one step in the process for this permit. If we were granted approval, we'd still have to move on to the DES and submit LDA plans. And so if that homeowner is listening or anything, just trying to alleviate those concerns that we would have to go through like a landscape plan and things like that. And just because we're seeking approval for the zoning relief, it doesn't absolve us of any of the standard requirements that DES will put on, whether it be runoff or plant requirements and stuff like that. So just saying that again, try to alleviate any concerns from any of the other neighbors about potential runoff and things like that. There will be bioretention boxes and things of that nature. With that, I leave the rest of my time for any questions you may have. I do know the owner did want to speak possibly too as well. So,
Well, if the owner wants to speak, this is the time.
okay,
Please. So this is the one. There's one. Thank you for your time here. There's been extensive collaboration with the county for this project. This is the hospital, just to try to give you guys an understanding of the area. This is the property that has already been approved with a new construction building home. This is the property we're trying to get the BZA approval for. This property had the exact same use permit already approved right here. We also are going to be developing a new construction home here, and the owners who we are under contract with have also signed for that approval. The county took a portion of the property running down Edison at some time in the past. That's also part of it. There's also been extensive collaboration with the county and Joe for that storm drain that is running through the property. And we are going to give easements on actually both properties with the county. And I'm hopeful that all of these factors, it's not affecting an adjoining property. It's facing the hospital. And we're not building some massive, overly elaborate house. And without this approval, I think the house is able to be only like 13 or 15 feet wide. Honestly, I can't recall the exact dimensions, but that is why we're requesting this. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any questions for the applicant or their representative?
I have a question.
Clark.
On the property that was 5009, is that the one that's new, that's adjoining?
So 5013 is the adjoining property that I own and already has an approved building permit for a new construction home. That's this home. 5008, I also am under contract to purchase with the neighbors. I'm-
I guess my question then is, did you get neighbor support from 5009 and 5012?
So I tried walking not just to these properties at multiple times, mornings and evenings, and even with people with storm doors closed, but front doors open. Literally with I printed out a pamphlet, 25 pamphlets, left them along the entire block saying, please email, call, we can give you all the information. It included the elevations, the floor plans, and everything that they would need to understand what was happening. But literally, I'm at the door saying, I'm not a solicitor, I'm a neighbor, and people are not answering their doors, genuinely.
And I think, sorry, Ms. Clark, if I'm interrupting, but I think we would typically be looking for the 5012 outreach, which is the neighbor directly across the street, because you either own or you represent the owner of 5013. So you've signed off on 5013.
So correct. So this is the only neighbor.
The one we're missing here is 5012.
This neighbor.
That neighbor. That's right.
This neighbor was not in support. They
That
were
neighbor
in
was not in support.
They were concerned about trees, and as somebody who owns a home, what's that?
Runoff.
Yes, they were concerned about trees and runoff.
Which is why it was, I didn't know if they were here or virtually, but we were just, I guess I wasn't there speaking with them, Ryan, and I tend to deal with the permitting side and everything. Just because, again, this is getting approved, I just want to stress to them that the process will be addressed, through LDA and all that. So I understand their concerns. We totally get that. We don't want anyone, having too much water rushing around. So we just wanted to, I guess, point that out for them.
I guess the other property though was 5009. We don't
They
have-
own that.
Oh, okay, so that's one that they own, but,
They tore, I think they tore it down and they're building it now. And they
Okay.
own that lot, correct?
Okay.
It has not been torn down yet, but it's the process, all of the site work is done and all of the site prep is done and we are about to knock the house down. And it was an existing, I just want to also make sure this wasn't a subdivision, this is an existing lot. And really, we're not trying to build some massive house. We're trying to, as Arlington is trying to increase, number of homes and things. It's a reasonably sized lot. There's not a loft, there's not, it's not a very overly large house.
And we're meeting setbacks along the other sides, and we meet lot coverage requirements as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Any additional questions for this applicant? Mr. Bowen, you know off the top of your head without looking it up when the lot was divided?
It would have to have been before July 15th, 1950 to be entitled to be used as a buildable lot. Or
Oh,
to
so
one that would attach
this
to it.
is a long ago subdivision.
Correct.
Okay. I thought that was in the staff report. I overlooked that fact. So that was my concern. Do my colleagues have any comments? I'll make
motion?
let me just make a quick comment. Typically in something like this, where it's a new build and the builder, can come with their plans and design however they want. I'd be much more, I don't know, skeptical is the right word, but much more against. But in this case, it borders the hospital. There's no one facing on that side. The most affected neighbor, I suppose, is the hospital. So I would be inclined to support this. But I don't know where my colleagues are. Mr. Bowen, there's no speakers for this, right? So that neighbor who we don't have feedback for is not here tonight. Can I assume that?
Not to my knowledge. I would like to amend my previous remarks. The lots existed prior to July 15th, 1950, but the subdivision in accordance with the creation of those lots was more recent. But the subdivision would only be possible if the lots had been created before July 15th, 1950.
At what point were those, did it go from one lot to two lot? Long time ago or more recent?
The lots themselves existed as theoretically buildable lots prior to July 15th, 1950, but the subdivision to make them buildable lots now in accordance with that original dedication of the lots was more recent.
Which is allowed under the code.
It was allowed under Article 60 of the zoning ordinance.
Was that these builders who did that subdivision or was that previous? I
believe so. They can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Right. And then, adding to that point is, that this, I don't know if this problem was created by that subdivision, although they were allowed to do that. And so, under those factors, I don't have a big problem with this. So that being said, I don't know where my colleagues are, but motions.
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Clark.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit V-11928-23-UP1, subject to the conditions as listed.
Second.
A motion for approval made by Ms. Clark, seconded by Ms. Freshman. I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to grant this use permit passes 3-0. Thank you. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the next case?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the next case is case number V-11929-23-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Anne Marie Zarega, the owner, to permit a right side setback of 3 feet to a new window well instead of 5 feet to the window well as required regarding a new window well to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 416 South Adams Street within the Penrose Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. I want to note that we have supplemental material for this case, and that includes an additional neighborhood outreach from the property owner, a letter of opposition from a neighbor, an email of opposition from another neighbor, 2 BZA comment forms expressing opposition, as well as supplemental photos of the subject property. And we also have 4 speakers who have signed up to speak on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Do my colleagues have questions for staff on this case? I have some questions. Mr. Bowen, we have a lot of supplemental material getting at multiple issues in this case. So I got some questions about that and about what the county's view in our role in considering some of this is. In your opinion, does this board care about the legal status of a rental on this property? Right? Is that part of our purview to approve a renovation to a rental that may or may not be allowed by the county?
I would not be comfortable giving you legal advice on that front.
Okay. The survey was quite old. And so obviously the county, not the staff, still sent that to us without requiring a newer survey. So I imagine that you might have concerns, but you still passed it on.
We do not have firm requirements for the date of surveys. We often advise applicants to submit a survey within the past 10 years, just because survey technology has improved markedly since the survey was first created, but it is not a firm requirement.
If I assume if this board approves this project, a new I don't want to say wall check survey, but a final survey would be required for this window egress?
I believe we have a condition in the
Right.
staff report and proposed resolution specifying as much.
And if that new survey came off the measurement even slightly, then this would likely be back before us with a hefty fee.
Potentially, this is an accessory structure, which are usually exempt from the fee of the higher after fact fee.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But depending
still
on
a fee and
what
having-
construction may or may not have occurred, it could trigger a higher
end up
fee.
back by us. And my experience with surveys that old is that that's one of the reasons people come back. And then lastly, there have been some pictures submitted in supplemental material which show structures that I don't believe are on the survey. Is that something, I know that oftentimes when we see cases like this before us, we are also granting approval for structures that have not been previously approved. Is that something that staff is concerned about?
I would say that I do not know necessarily when those photographs were taken. I believe they were taken recently, but I do not know for sure. I believe the appropriate mechanism to analyze the conformity of the property may be a zoning enforcement case being triggered rather than an action from county staff regarding that matter.
And I guess that's
From the BZA staff, I should say.
Right, and I guess that's for this board to kind of weigh when in approval is kind of those issues.
Correct.
Okay, I guess let's hear from, do my colleagues have any further questions? Let's hear from the applicant. Assuming the applicant is here.
I believe I see her name online. Ms. Rega, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. If you're participating via phone, you can press, I believe, *6 to unmute yourself.
I did unmute. It doesn't turn the camera on, but it did unmute, I think.
Okay, thank you. We can hear you now.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, we have a tenant that lives downstairs, and the basement has a bedroom, and this window would be an escape window that would give added security to the tenant, that they can escape in the time of fire.
Is that your
I don't know. I've never been through anything like this before, so I don't know what to do, what the problem is, and like that. But that seems a pretty simple request. It does absolutely nothing to the street, to the wall. It's just changing a 21-inch window into a 40-inch window. That's literally it.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for this applicant? Let's hear from the speakers. Are you, I'm not going to try.
I'm actually Christina Kennett.
Oh,
Do you want to speak to Mary first?
no, we can skip to you and we'll go back. You're here. So please, Ms. Kennett, can you start with where you live, if you're a neighboring neighbor or not, or?
I live at 408 South Adams Street, and my mother lives at 412 South Adams Street, which is directly adjacent to where this variance is.
408 and 412. So, oh, okay. So the two neighbors.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to read this.
Thank you.
I am here because I'm concerned for my mother's safety and my family's safety. I provided a letter of opposition, and I want to speak to the false information provided in the application. Anne Marie has Mr. Keller manage her property. He acts as her agent in overseeing the general care and maintenance of the property. He also manages the rental apartment in the basement, which includes the bedroom egress window in question. Anne Marie is absent from the property, spending 5 months of the year in Cape Cod. My husband has a protective order against Mr. Keller, who resides at 416 South Adams. The protective order includes by name my household at 408, my mother's house.
Hey, I'm gonna kill you, shut up.
At 412, and my daughter. One restriction is that Mr. Keller is to remain 500 feet away from my husband and family members, with the exception of ingress and egress to his property. This project would create the potential that direct communication would likely need to occur to construct this egress window. Given Mr. Keller's documented behavior, any potential interaction is a direct violation of the protective order and puts my mother's safety at risk. Approving this variance would provide legal egress access up to my mother's property line. I'm also here tonight to speak to the vague and misleading and false aspects of this application. This application reflects the absolute least effort to comply. The square footage of the structure and lot coverage on the application are incorrect. The 3-foot variance requested is based on an approximate value from a 32-year-old survey that in no way reflects the existing structures today. The drawings are incomplete, and if constructed as shown, would not provide the 24-inch minimum opening for egress. And with the structures outside the window, safe egress from the proposed well are in question. All key components of this application would need to be amended. We ask that you deny this variance. Mr. Keller is uncontrollable. He pled guilty March 27th to a violation of the protective order of another neighbor. When he pled guilty, he told the judge that he didn't understand the protective order. He thought it went both ways. Mr. Keller is a bad actor, intentionally violating and then asking for relief. Whatever you approve, he will use to hurt us. I do not support this variance while Mr. Keller is in residence at 416.
Thank you. Is the first speaker on the list here? Please. Not going to try and massacre that name.
Say the letters and it works out. Good evening. I'm also having some challenges with some allergies and my throat's not very clear. Good evening. My name is Mary Kvitashvili. I purchased my home in the Penrose neighborhood across the street from Miss Zarega in 2006, and I've been living there since 2007.
Can you state your address for the
Your
record?
address? 419 South Adams Street.
Thank you.
I request the Zarega application be denied for these following reasons. Dave Keller is a tenant at Ms. Zarega's house and has in the past and still acts as Ms. Zarega's agent when it comes to her illegal basement rental apartment. Ms. Zarega spends many months away from her home during the spring to fall season, so Keller becomes the in-charge point of contact for the renters. As an unlicensed tradesman, he has performed electrical, plumbing, and other work on her house. Note the advertisement contained in some of my neighbors' letters provided to the BZA that Keller placed in social media advertising Ms. Zarega's fully remodeled one-bedroom full kitchen apartment. I do not support expansion of an already illegal rental property that has been reported by former tenants who have flooding and mold problems. I was told by a former tenant that when they complained to Ms. Zarega about the mold that was not remediated, that Ms. Zarega told the tenant that she has nothing to do with the apartment and to take it up with Dave Keller. Keller's threatening behavior is well documented by the county, as he is under current protective and no trespassing orders by myself, and a protective order by the entire 5-member Kennett Morse family who occupy the 2 residences next to Ms. Zarega, to include where the egress window is to be installed. His threats to me include killing me and my animals, beating me up, and he came onto my property late one night and violently tried to tear down my porch security lights. He has threatened Mr. Kennett with bodily harm and has routinely ignored the protective order. He has been assigned by the court to take an anger management class as part of the condition of his guilty plea to violating my protective order about 2 weeks ago. The legal disposition of the hearing on Keller's violation of my protective order states that Keller is to have no contact whatsoever with myself and or the Kennett Morse families. The order states that he must remain 500 feet away from myself and the Kennett Morse family, except during egress and ingress to his own property. This means that if the request for the application is granted, the protective order will be violated, having an egress window less than 500 feet from the Kennett and Morse houses, and it will give him access to the Kennett Morse family. For the safety of the Kennett Morse family, I urge you not to allow the variance and installation of this not to code egress window to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kennett here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Thomas Kennett. And Mr. David Keller acts as Anne-Marie Zarega's agent overseeing general care and maintenance of the property. One of my first encounters with Mr. Keller was in the summer of 2012 when Dave Keller was doing electrical work at my mother-in-law's house at 212 South Adams Street. He told her he was a licensed electrician. DPOR of Virginia has no record of David Keller as a licensed electrician in their system. When Judy asked for his license number and to confirm with DPOR, he told her it was packed in a box. He never provided his license number, and it is not on the invoice that he provided Judy Morse either. He consistently does what he wants with no regard for code, zoning, and laws. He is dangerous. This involves the safety and security of my family, as well as other members of the neighborhood. I'm speaking out for the safety of the renter who moved in April 1st. When this application was filed, the apartment was vacant. They knowingly rented an apartment with a non-compliant bedroom, endangering that woman's life. The drawings that they provided show a double hung egress window, which will not meet code. There's a gasoline portable generator installed right next to this egress window, proposed egress window. Making that egress window bigger would make it even more dangerous with carbon monoxide poisoning. And this apartment has been rented for over 20 years. I believe there are 4 full bathrooms in this house, which would require an upgrade to the water service from the street to the meter and from the meter to the house. And a basement bathroom would also require a backwater valve as it's below the manhole cover in the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Ms. Morse here?
Hi,
Good evening.
I'm Judy Morse, and I am speaking this evening in opposition to the requested variance at
I'm sorry,
416.
Can you state your address?
I'm at 412 South Adams Street, just adjacent
Thank you.
to the requested window. I live next door at 412, and the proposed egress window is just feet away from my property. And on that property line, over a year ago, I had a fence installed to keep Mr. Keller from coming onto my property. I have many concerns with the submitted documents for this variance, and here are many of them. My written comments provided to the BZA prior elaborate on these issues. Initially, the application itself contains misleading and incorrect information. Existing building footprint and lot coverage do not reflect the current status. The only notification that we received to the abutting properties was from Arlington County's letter that we just received on Monday, April 8th. And then the yellow sign that was posted a few days later on the telephone pole out front.
It's been going on since 7.
Go. On.
There was no
Just a
other
video.
contact regarding this variance request from the homeowner to any of the residents at 412, 413, 415, 419, and 420 South Adams, as well as 409 South Barton across the back fence. The only reference in the entire application to the variance distance is on a 32-year-old survey that states it is not a boundary survey, and a 6-foot distance between house and property line is approximate. The certified plat does not reflect existing structures. Sketched proposed changes only show one window on the side of the house without dimensions showing its location. There are 2 basement windows. The deck that was approved in 1995 was replaced by an addition to the back of the house around 20 years ago. The statement of justification says it will significantly increase usable living space in the home. The basement space is and has been a rental apartment for many, many years. Location of the egress window cannot be accurately determined from the architectural drawings and floor plan because the drawings do not show the finished rental apartment dimensions, partitions, and any other features of the apartment, like the full kitchen, full bath, living area, bedroom, door to the laundry room, window locations, exit door to outside stairwell, etc. Outside the window, directly adjacent to the proposed window well or egress well, there is a gasoline generator in an enclosure on one side and a shed for firewood on the other side. structures that are not on any plats or floor plans submitted. CDC recommends placing portable generators in open air at least 20 feet from any door, window, or vent. The window as specified will not fit and would not conform to code egress requirements, endangering anybody who attempts to use it.
Thank you.
And lastly, I'm including the information about the protective order because this would put him within just a few feet of my windows as well.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions for any of these speakers or the applicant?
Mr. Kaplan,
Yes.
Mr. Lawson also signed up to speak.
Mr. Lawson signed up to speak for this case. Mr. Lawson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. William B. Lawson Jr. I live at 900 North Stafford Street, 2323 Arlington, Virginia. I'm speaking on behalf of an attorney colleague of mine named Mark Cummings, who could not be here tonight. And he has been advising the neighbors regarding the harassment that they've been receiving from the manager of this house. And this person seems to live to harass his neighbors. He put security lights up and then aimed them directly into the neighbor's house. On the protective order, you can see, I think it was Judge Rucker, said, don't aim the light into your neighbor's house. And we believe, this would be interpretation, but we believe this could be a violation of the protective order because he has been ordered to stay 500 feet away from these individuals unless he's entering his house. And he's supposed to go straight into the house. And the only door was the one that was in the front. Now there's this one on the side. In a normal situation, you would say, yeah, but that's for the occupant of the basement. This is not a normal situation. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is this generator is inside of a box and we don't know how it's installed. But it's supposed to comply with the zoning ordinance, which it doesn't. And according to the literature for best practices, it should be at least 5 feet away from any windows because otherwise fumes could enter the house and it's not 5 feet away from a number of the windows. Don't fault the staff at all. They thought this was a normal case. Thank you.
Mr. Lawson, I'm sorry, but I know my colleagues have questions. I missed at the beginning. Who do you represent?
I'm representing the neighbors. They have an attorney named Mark Cummings. He couldn't be here tonight and asked me to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that all for the speakers? Thank you. Discussion with the board, I suppose?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Freshman?
unusually for me, I'm speechless. This is clearly a law enforcement issue. It feels less like a zoning issue to me. I'm confused by the lack of specificity with regard to the plat and the plans vis-a-vis the size of the window, the location of the generator, et cetera. So I think it's definitely something that requires more investigation. But even if the BZA determines that a window well is the answer to bringing this apartment into up to code, that doesn't really address the law enforcement issue. But I would suggest a 2-month deferral to sort out these things with the requirement that there be a new survey.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark, do you want to add?
Well, I think Judy stated it, saying it's not really a zoning issue with all the complaints that were alleged, but having, I guess, the basement apartment and granting the request for the window well, that would not make it compliant with the other violations
That's
that
right.
were stated.
Right, I think that there are some zoning issues that I would like to see resolved before we were to move forward with this. As you know, I will parrot Ms. Freshman in that I find that the 1992 plat just wholly unrealistic for us to consider this plan. And it doesn't even say where that window well would be. It just is in, you know, on the side of the wall. It doesn't say what the setback is from the front or the back in order for us to even know what we're approving. And then I would also want to see a survey that has all of the zoning requirements on it. So any generators, any sheds, you know, in order for I think this board, my view is for this board to approve this, we would need to see the entire picture of what's going on this property. And so I would support Ms. Freshman's 2-month deferral with the understanding that at least, you know, my concerns would be addressed. No one spoke to whether it's within our purview of dealing with a apartment that may or may not be in compliance with Arlington. I don't know that that's within our purview. I also don't know that it wasn't, and no one's addressed that. So I don't know that that's before us at the moment. But you know, that I could foresee someone bringing that issue in 2 months.
That can be addressed in the course of the further review.
That's right, exactly. And so,
and frankly, I think a problematic person who is apparently in charge of managing the property should be of concern to the owner and others. But that, as I say, that sounds more like a management and law enforcement issue, not within our purview. I'm happy to make a motion.
thank you, Ms. Freshman.
Mr. Kaplan, the applicant does have their hand up in the Teams chat. The applicant has their hand up in the chat.
Thank you. I think we're going to discussions with the board. I would just remind Ms. Freshman that we have a appeal hearing in June as well. So I imagine that we're going to get a lot of speakers again in June. So I don't know if that factors into your length of your.
What's May look like?
We have not yet published the May agenda. I believe we have 8 cases at the moment and a potential for a handful more. So some are probably in the 8 to 12 range, I would estimate at this moment.
I'd be skeptical that the applicant could be able to get a survey done before May.
So you want more time, or what is it you're suggesting?
I'm just laying out, June or July, I'm just laying out that I know we.
Well, thanks to EHO, we have, no life anyway. So I will move on the case V-11929-23-UP1. I move deferral to the June 12th, 24 BZA hearing.
I'll second.
A motion for deferral to June 12th made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. This matter is deferred until June. Hopefully we will get more information to be able to render a decision. Thank you all. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the next case?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan. Next case is case number V-11930-23-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Yasar Ozturk, the owner, to permit a right side setback of 9.4 feet to the building wall instead of 10 feet to the building wall as required, to permit a left side setback of 8.4 feet to the building wall instead of 10 feet to the building wall as required, to permit a left side setback of 4.1 feet to the mechanical equipment instead of 5 feet to the mechanical equipment as required, and to permit an aggregate side yard width of 13.2 feet instead of 18 feet as required, regarding an after-the-fact approval for a 2-story addition to an existing 1-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 1708 South Nelson Street within the Douglas Park Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. At this time, we do not have any speakers who have signed up to speak on this case, nor do we have any supplemental materials.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Any questions for Ms. Freshman?
Question. How did this case come to be on our docket as it is an after the fact?
Sir, we'll call you up when we're ready. Thank you.
Ms. Freshman, I would be happy to defer to the owner. In this case, I believe just given that the setbacks are off just a bit from the approved setbacks, it might have been a building location error or a small error in construction, would be my suspicion, but I believe the applicant can confirm those details.
Okay, so it's not the result of a complaint. We think it's a construction issue. And I realize the applicant can answer the question. I'm just trying to determine the process by which it's here.
Yes, I believe I would again defer to the applicant, but it's quite possible that they are unable to get some sort of final approval or perhaps some sort of certificate of occupancy, given that there's a setback that has not been built in accordance with approved building plans.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Tonight. Well, my name is Yashar Rusuk, and I will try to speak as clearly as possible. My accent is not very understandable. Sorry about that. I bought the house from contractor, and he lives a couple hours away from here. I used to work for them. I was a tile contractor for them. And as far as I know, the issue was concrete contractors didn't wait until the wall check. Then they poured the concrete in. Then frame people got there. So by the time that was realized, it was too late. So after I bought the house from them and I tried to put all the permits, and I see this issue came up from the engineer told me that. So this was all the construction.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions for this applicant? Discussion with the board? Motions?
Much as I do not like after the facts, I will. In the case V-11930-23-UP1, I'll move approval, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
I'll second.
A motion made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark for approval. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to pass this after the fact approval passes 3-0. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the next case?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, the very next case on the agenda, case number V-11931-23-UP-1 was approved in a group motion at the start of the hearing. So jumping ahead to the following case, that's case number V-11932-23-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Jaime Zapata and Gabriela Gomez, the owners, to permit a street setback of 18.2 feet to the accessory structure and entry landing, 17.9 feet to the accessory structure's eave instead of 25 feet to the accessory structure, 21 feet to the accessory structure eave as required from 17th Street South, and to permit an aggregate side yard width of 17.3 feet instead of 18 feet as required regarding modifications of an existing accessory structure, entry landing to an existing one-family dwelling in the R5 zoning district on the premises known as 1018 17th Street South within the Arlington Ridge Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution approving the use permit request with conditions. Please note that we do not have any supplemental materials nor speakers who have signed up to speak on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Questions for staff? Mr. Bowen, why is this not a porch?
That's an interesting question. The proposed structure does not have two columns supporting a roof. It has one column. Therefore, it does not meet our definition of porch. And as you may have noticed, it also does not meet our definition of stoop, nor does it meet a definition of a deck. So we have defaulted to the much more general accessory structure / landing description.
So if this had a second column, does this qualify for the encroachment?
I believe it would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. It's the applicant with us. Come on down. We have a picture of that, Mr. Bowen. Did I miss that?
I believe there is a picture of the elevation there on the right of the proposed conditions.
So there's not a column on the other side?
There's not.
Okay. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
This is a new one. Would you like to speak to your application?
Sure. So my name is Jaime Zapata. This is my wife, Gabriela Gomez. We are the owners and residents of that property. And We are happy to answer any of your questions. We don't have any additional comments beyond the excellent staff report where we too learned that we have not a porch that we're planning, but rather
Accessory.
an accessory structure, also an entry landing. So.
And we have our contractor here with us too.
Yeah,
If there's
you all have it.
questions. Yes.
Oh, can I just ask that I'm familiar with the property. So you're going to enter at ground level
Correct.
and the stair issue is interior
That is correct.
as opposed to the way it is now.
Yes.
It's going to look a lot better. by the
We
way.
agree. We also know that it will make it a much safer, as if you're familiar with the property, you know, it faces north and the structure is tall enough that those steps in the front always they ice over and they
they're
become a
constantly
real
breaking
danger.
and we're constantly trying to repair them.
You appear to have found a loophole to come before us, not to avoid us.
Oh,
Oh,
Just, if there was a second column, you wouldn't be here.
oh, is that right?
Yeah, just
Wow.
as a quirk. That's why it's pretty entertaining to me at least. Thank you.
Motion?
Please, Ms. Frischman.
Case V-11932-23-UP1, I move approval subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
A motion for passage by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark. Hearing no discussion, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman,
Aye.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Motion passes 3-0. Mr. Bowen, number 8.
Yes, Mr. Kaplan. The very next case on the agenda, case number case number V-11933-23-VA-1 was approved in a group motion at the start of the hearing. So moving on to the following case, that's case number V-11934-23-VAA-1. This is a variance request by Northworth Architects on behalf of Lawrence J. and Karen Fowler, the owners, to permit a main building footprint of 3,499 square feet instead of 2,772 square feet as required for a one-family detached dwelling with a qualifying front porch in the R6 zoning district regarding a new one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 1908 North Quebec Street within the Cherrydale Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the variance. An alternative resolution and conditions have been provided should the BZA see fit to approve the application as advertised. Please note that we do have we do have additional speakers who have signed up to speak on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Do we have questions for staff on this item? The applicant with us. Come on down.
We do have some supplemental material if we're allowed to. Included in the supplemental material is a rendering of the proposed design, an additional elevation just showing the streetscape of the design, and 2 additional neighbor outreach forms. One is a letter from the neighbor to the south, and one is just a certified mail receipt showing that we attempted to reach out to one of our neighbors to the north.
Thank you.
Yes. If I may speak.
Please.
Good evening to the members of the board and to all of our Cherrydale neighbors who were able to join us tonight. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. My name is Ryan Fowler. I'm a registered architect with the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I work for Northworks Architects. I'm here today along with my colleague, Teresa Pangilinan, to represent our clients, Lawrence J. and Karen J. Fowler, for their requests for the variance at their property, 1908 North Quebec Street. We'd like to begin by addressing some of the comments and concerns that were raised by the planners at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and in addition, provide some additional insight into our design process for the project and why we believe the board should move to approve this variance as advertised. First, I would like to address the property as it stands today. The property is zoned as R6, which, while typical for our neighborhood, is unusual for how large the parcel is. For reference, a typical R6 lot is at minimum 6,000 square feet and on average around 8,000 square feet. The property in question, 1908 North Quebec Street, is significantly larger at 10,914 square feet. And if it was just a bit wider, for reference, roughly the breadth of my outstretched arms, it would exceed the minimum requirements for an R10 zoning, which the design as drawn would be allowable. The owners acquired this property out of good faith in 2022 because of its size, hoping that they would be able to design their forever home in which they could comfortably age in place despite their ongoing health concerns. Accessibility and single level living was their #1 concern. The house which exists on the property cannot be reasonably regarded as accessible to an aging occupant. Besides its poor condition, the basement access stairs no longer meet the code required riser sizes, and the numerous stairs to get to the first floor would make it difficult for the owners to get into their house or to the detached garage at the rear of the site. Our proposed design as drawn has a footprint of 3,449 square feet, but we would like to emphasize that the programmatic elements are not generous in comparison to the typical Arlington home. Rather, the square footage is due to the accessible routes throughout the house, which were designed with consideration for future wheelchair use due to the owner's previous health concerns. Having an attached garage is a must for accessibility for ease and use. Everything was considered, from clear door widths to the possibility of a roll-in shower. Furthermore, the main building design as drawn covers just 31.6% of the site, less than the 33% required by code, but more than the arbitrary 2,772 square feet, which is required. If we were to adhere to the 2,772 square foot maximum for an abnormally large site, it would unreasonably restrict the size of the house on the site to just 25.4% coverage, which is far less than what is typical for Arlington. We would also like to address our design process and considerations for the neighborhood. Far too often, we see developers taking advantage of their property sizes, maxing out that 2,772 square foot limit and building up. That would dwarf older homes in the neighborhoods and disrupts the beautiful, historic urban fabric of neighborhoods like Cherrydale. We are not proposing a massive design that would have this effect on our neighbors. In fact, we took great care to minimize the apparent scale of the building so that the 2-story portion of the structure is completely hidden from the street. If you reference our reference image on the first sheet of the packet we gave you, you can get a glimpse of what the proposed structure would look like across the street. And you'll notice that you cannot see that second floor structure. Instead of a towering, imposing structure, the proposed design borrows the gentle language of the quaint existing homes in Cherrydale. When compared to the neighboring structures, the proposed design fits perfectly with the neighboring roof datums and even appears smaller than the other buildings. And you will notice that on the second sheet that we provided to you today. I think you will find from the wonderful support neighbors that we received from our wonderful support letters, that this building will be a net positive for the Cherrydale neighborhood. We hope that you will consider our case presented today. To reiterate, we find that this particular property has an unusual condition that it is abnormally large for an R6 zone, and that the case brought forward today cannot be broadly applied to Arlington as a whole. We hope that you understand the necessity for our clients to have an accessible home in which all the livable program is on the first floor. And finally, we hope that you find our design is greatly respectful of the existing neighborhood and seeks to minimize its apparent size. Please find these reasons are sufficient to accept our variance as advertised. Now, I know we're running low on time, but if time does allow, I would like to allow the owner to speak a little bit about them buying the home and to their current conditions. Thank you very much. Briefly.
Thank you. I'll talk fast. My name is Karen Fowler. I'm the owner. My husband was unable to attend, unfortunately. We moved to Arlington from out of state in May 2021 to be closer to our children at the time. We searched for a home with a master bedroom on the main level, but did not find one. We settled on our current home knowing we would like to purchase a home to better fit our needs in the near future. We love Arlington and wanted to stay in the area, so we purchased 1908 North Quebec in October 2022. The previous owners would not allow us to enter the home to see the condition, and no interior pictures were available. We could only walk the exterior of the property. We love the neighborhood and the very generous sized lot, thinking it would be perfect to remodel the home or build a single-story residence. Once purchased, we entered the home. For the first time, we realized remodeling would be extensive. The basement floor was literally crumbling under our feet, and the ceilings were so low they were causing me to duck my head. The house was not easily accessible to enter. We hired Northworks architects to design a house that would permit us to age in place comfortably. My husband will be 72 in May, and has stage 4 cancer. Although he's currently in remission, the treatment he endured was very debilitating. His cancer, type of melanoma, can spread easily to all organs at any time. It has already metastasized to his lungs, which required him to have radiation treatment, which was very debilitating and required him to be wheelchair bound at the time. We need our home to be livable on just one floor to accommodate the future need of a wheelchair for us to comfortably use the home. We need wider doorways, space to maneuver easily, and to access our home without stairs. We hope you consider our plea and grant our variance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, out of motion. We sit down.
Does my colleagues have any questions for this applicant? You can sit.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay,
thank
sorry.
you.
I'm sorry I got emotional.
No, quite all right. Thank you. Is Mr. Doherty here?
I'm sorry, you're asking for the other owner?
Mr. Doherty signed up to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you correctly.
Hi, my name is Don Doherty. I'm at 1909 North Quebec, the house directly across the street. And I'm here to support their request for the variance. My logic is threefold. First of all, the design of the house, it's pleasant, it's consistent, it's complementary to the existing neighborhood overall, as opposed to sticking out in any way. Number two, if you look at there's a large amount of the space is actually offset away from the street. So it's almost like it was designed to be accommodating for the existing neighbors, which is a nice thing. The third thing is, if it's rejected and they have to sell the property and somebody else builds there, we could tell if by the other houses that go up in the area, it'll probably be a dramatically larger, dramatically bigger, more obtrusive house, right? So those are my three things. There's another neighbor here. He suggests that I also bring up the fact that the design is designed to collect more rainwater, more runoff water than is required by the ordinance. So in this case, I think we in Arlington, we have a unique opportunity to have a nice, appropriately sized, appropriately designed house built into a nice neighborhood. And so I hope you accept or approve their request. And thanks for hearing me.
Thank you. Colleagues.
Isn't there one speaker?
Oh, is Mr. Nastasi different from the applicant and the applicant's agent we heard from? Sure. No. Okay. That's what I figured. Thank you. So questions or discussion with the board? Ms. Clark?
I guess, was the applicant aware of the alternative proposal and are they not in favor of that?
Yeah, Ms. Clark, by alternative proposal, what are you referring to? Our alternative resolution?
Yes, the alternative.
Approval as advertised?
Yes,
Yeah, that would be the plans as presented.
but there was one advertised and then the alternative.
The recommendation.
The recommendation is for denial,
Okay, okay,
and the alternative is based on the plan submitted.
okay.
Mr. Bowen, what is, if the garage were to be detached in order to get the 3% coverage bump, what's the minimum detachment space?
It would actually be a 5% bonus and it would need to be located in the rear yard. In terms of the detachment bonus, it would merely be dictated by the accessory building standards. It would likely need to be about 8 feet away from the building wall to accessory building wall would need to be 8 feet.
What, here, I'm gonna rhetorically ask, what is square footage of 5%? You probably don't know that off the top of your head.
Sorry, what was the, sound like a math problem?
What does 5% get us for the coverage bump?
I would need to do a little bit of math on that.
I can do that too. Discussion.
This one's a bit of a challenge for me because typically my position is if you buy a property and you tear down the house, it's very obvious and clear what your buildable area is. And any creative person can come up with a structure that fits within that buildable area. And so I typically am inclined to not be terribly sympathetic because what I fear is that builders will just come in and put the biggest house they can possibly squeeze onto a lot. And in some cases, they actually don't get an exception, but they build absolutely the most so that they put in a slider in the dining room and you can't walk out because you can't get, if you come in later to get a deck or something, the coverage doesn't allow it. In this case, I'm somewhat persuaded. I think the design is lovely, and I think the need to have an accessible dwelling is persuasive. Being in the older cohort, I'm very sympathetic to that as a general matter. So I'm interested in how my colleagues feel about it. I feel I'm a little bit torn, but and typically I would support the staff position. So I'm kind of interested in where my colleagues are and this, just because I feel as if it may be a candidate for me to go against my better judgment.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. You want me to go first, or you want to go?
Yeah, I'm still looking for.
I'm really torn on this one. I mean, as Ms. Freshman wisely stated, that oftentimes when we raise a house, you have options to do with it what you want. I'm struggling with the ask here of 3,500 square feet versus the 2,772 is a 26% increase over what is normally allowable. And here the applicant has cited an abnormally large property, but that's not really a hardship to buy an oversized lot. So then we fall back to the code provision in Virginia that allows a person with a disability to request a variant. But I'm struggling to see why 26%? Why not 13%? Why not, something more in line? I don't think anyone here is going to argue that this applicant, doesn't have a hardship in order to, have the factors that they described with having to build wider doors and in the list that they said. But I'm struggling with 26% over, and we can get 100 and some square feet by moving the garage a little bit over. So I don't know. I'm really torn. I don't know what to do or how to be persuaded. I don't know how my colleagues feel about a deferral to May when our two additional colleagues are here who can weigh in. The last point, oftentimes this board also has trouble determining medical disability, and it's not really our role, or we don't have that expertise to be able to determine what one disability is worth or gets you in terms of not questioning the veracity of it, but what the relationship between the ask and the need. And I know that at some point we have sent, and Mr. Mon, maybe but the applicants have sometimes sent this type of medical stuff to the county attorney's office. Is my memory correct?
At times when there have been other requests who have posited a hardship based on a disability, we do not typically publish any personal medical data due to privacy concerns, but applicants do sometimes submit it. And because these requests are rare and not particularly common, we have discussed them with the county attorney's office on occasion.
And has that been done in this case?
In this case, we passed them a draft of the report, but no particular discussions on the matter.
Yeah, it's something for this board to think about for future process and procedures, coming up with some kind of standardized process for these type of cases that do come in a couple a year, but that's, future discussion for us. So I don't know. Ms. Clark, did you have anything to add?
I guess the question I had was in the alternative resolution, it's discussing a detached dwelling. So if this was built with if the alternative was approved, they would have to agree to build it detached.
No, the alternative resolution would be the project as designed. So as shown in the plans, the staff report did posit, some possible design considerations. The main one being that, if you have a detached garage in the rear yard, you did a 5% coverage bonus. And also that square footage would come out of the main building footprint, which is the reason the variance is being sought. Mr. Kaplan, to answer your earlier question about 5% of the lot size, that would be about 545 square feet.
Which gets us most of the way to the ask, not all of it, but most of the way.
Yeah, I believe it's 727 square feet
So
of
it
overage at
gets
the
us
moment.
two-thirds of the way there. So that, that's kind of, Virginia law requires us to, make that accommodation, but it doesn't require us to accept, anything and everything that the applicant wants. Do my colleagues want to hear more to inform our decision?
Maybe briefly, I think I tend to agree with you in terms of the percentage of the overage, if you will. That's not exactly right, but this is not a minor exception. This is more than 25% exception, and the size of the lot is not relevant. Most of the lots, at least half of the lots on the tax map are considerably smaller and more in line with R6. We don't mix zoning in any block just based on the size of the lot. So I think, that to me is really an issue because the exception is large.
And right, so I guess my gut is to kick this to the full board instead of having the three of us, because we would need a unanimous board right now, and I'm not sure that that's entirely fair to the applicant in this case. So my feeling would be instead of trying to move or get a denial, that's my feeling here.
I think it would be appropriate to defer it to May.
To May. I don't think the applicant has to do anything.
Because I think I'm not sure that you could. Requiring all three of us to agree to override the staff recommendation is, I think, unlikely. Whereas if you defer for a month and you have full complement of 5, there's some wiggle room for people who have objections to so state, and without necessarily meaning that the project is denied.
I would agree with the deferral.
With that discussion, did you still want to add anything very briefly? Yes, briefly though, please. Yeah. Yep.
Closer to the mic.
We've done what we think is an adequate trial on what that would look like. Despite having this be an accessibility issue, that it is no longer attached to the main structure and making it a little bit challenging considering they want to be able to use the car as well. So the whole accessibility, the whole livability when it comes to that, number one, but that was already stated. When the garage is in the rear of the house, or excuse me, the property, the driveway is now longer. So the lot coverage is changing. We're within the lot coverage, we're within the setbacks. We are fully reviewed and approved through all permitting except this one comment. This was submitted based on the assumption that 33% was what we were able to build on this lot. I'm happy to answer anything else or comment on anything else, but I can also step away. even LDA.
I'm just reading something real quick here. So, that anyone
Motion for the deferral.
motions for, I mean, I don't know if someone wants to try an approval. But I suspect we're headed towards a deferral. I will motion for a deferral to our May 15th meeting for the purposes of getting our entire set of colleagues here to hear this item.
Want me to do it?
I just motioned, so I need a second.
Oh,
Second.
Tied second. Motion for deferral to our May 15th hearing made by the chair, seconded by Ms. Clark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for deferral passes 3-0. Mr. Bowen, can you please call the next case?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan. I believe the next two cases on the agenda, V-11935-24-UP-1, as well as case number V-11936- oh, excuse me, just the next case on the agenda, I believe. Give me just one moment.
I think we're on 11.
Yes. Sorry, I believe it's just the next case on the agenda that was included in the group motion at the start of the hearing. Case number V-11935-24-UP-1 was approved in the group motion at the start of the hearing. So moving on to. No, I was right the first time. It was the next two cases. Yes. So case number V-11935-24-UP-1, as well as case number V-11936-24-UP-1 were included in the group motion at the start of the hearing and have been approved. So we're moving on to case number V-11937-24-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Paul and Rachel Ryan, the owners, to permit a left side setback of 21.7 feet to the building wall instead of 25 feet to the building wall as required. To permit a left side setback of 14.6 feet to the eave instead of 21 feet to the eave as required. To permit a left side setback of 22.3 feet to the chimney instead of 23.5 feet to the chimney as required. To permit a right side setback of 8 feet to the chimney instead of 23.5 feet to the chimney as required. To permit a right side setback of 8 feet to the balcony instead of 21 feet to the balcony as required. To permit a right side setback of 8 feet to the rear porch, 8.7 feet to the building eaves, and 6.3 feet to the porch eaves instead of 25 feet to the porch, 21 feet to the building eaves and porch eaves as required. And to permit a right side setback of 19.2 feet to the building wall instead of 25 feet to the building wall as required regarding a new roofing above existing two-story dwelling, a rear two-story addition with eaves, a new rear porch with eaves, a new balcony, 2 overhang fireplaces, and a new covered front porch with eaves to an existing one-family detached dwelling on a pipe stem lot in the R8 zoning district on the premises known as 2804 North Harrison Street within the Yorktown Civic Association. Staff recommends that the BZA adopt the attached proposed resolution partially granting and partially denying the subject BZA use permit request with conditions. Staff has also provided the BZA an alternative resolution in case the BZA sees fit to approve the subject use permit request as advertised. At the moment, I'm not aware of any speakers in support or in opposition to the project, and we do not have any supplemental materials that have been submitted at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Can you, Mr. Goldberg, can you bring up the proposed plat so we can look at that while there's a lot going on this one. Any questions for staff? The applicant with us. Come on down. Go ahead.
Rachel Ryan,
Paul Ryan.
for 2804 North Harrison Street. So we did bring a few pictures that I might hand out if you think that would be helpful. We bought this property in 2016, and part of the reason we loved it, it's spacious, there's a lot of green space. In that time, we've come to absolutely love the neighbors, schools. We now have 4 children between the ages of 5 and 12. And it was built in 1987, so is in need of some renovations and a different configuration of space for our family. So we started working with an architect to design an expansion. He checked with the county to verify the setbacks and was told standard setbacks. Once we submitted the design for approval with permitting, it was flagged by zoning that this is a pipe stem lot. And when the home was built in 1987, it's a bit unusual. I had a conversation with Stephen yesterday, and he kind of walked me through this. It's a little unusual in that there actually were zoning ordinances in place for this lot when it was built, but they've since changed. So at the time, there were not the 25-foot setbacks, and the news of the 25-foot setbacks came as a big surprise to us, obviously limiting drastically the space that we have to work with. So we have, the way our house is set up, there are two homes back in the, actually, do you want to maybe handing these out just so they can see? There are two homes down a long driveway. Both were built at the same time. Our next door neighbors are original owners. When we kind of been keeping them updated on all of this, they were also unaware of the pipe stem designation and the 25 feet. We would like to note that because it is a pipe stem lot, there are not a lot of comparable houses. So when I was talking to Stephen yesterday, I said, could you possibly expand the radius of the 1,000 feet to try to get more examples? And he said that typically you like to keep it within the 1,000. So he didn't expand, but said, if we know of other examples to bring them up. And certainly one of the examples is our home next door, which has similar 8-foot setbacks on one side and a balcony out the back like we have. So on the right-hand side, I think it's important to note that where we are asking for those setbacks of the 8 feet, the examples that are given in the staff report are setbacks to building walls. The setback to our building wall is 19 feet. The setbacks are to a screened-in porch in that corner. And we currently have a deck in that space that has those same 8-foot setbacks. That's an original deck that was built when the house was constructed. We also have that 8-foot setback to the chimney. We did have an architect show us, and this is the last page of the packet that we handed out. We had an architect show us what a house would look like on our lot with the 25-foot setbacks that are required. And it's my understanding we could tear our house down and build this without being here. But the issue is it would obviously drastically change the landscape. It would change the water runoff. Our house, our lot is at an elevation, so we think it would also be much less popular with the neighbors. We've gotten support from all of our neighbors on this. We sat down with anyone who asked. We went through plans. We have enthusiastic support from all of them. Whereas I think building a house like is shown on this last page, they would end up with a very large, narrow building kind of overlooking into their backyards. So we weren't wild about that. We think it makes sense to try to expand the footprint that is here, which is why we're requesting that. Anything else?
Can you walk us through these pictures? I'm not sure what I'm looking at.
Absolutely, yes. So the first page I took standing at the top of our driveway, just showing that we have these two kind of mirror image houses. The one on the left, the gray house is our neighbor's house. They are original owners from 1987. The blue house on the right is our house. The next page, I just wanted to show that the neighbor's house has a similar setback as that ours has. I asked Stephen if he had a plat so that he could include comps from their lot, and he looked it up yesterday and said there's nothing. So he said if you can get pictures, that would be helpful. So that's just kind of showing they have a similar setback, and same, they have that deck out the back that we have with the same 8-foot setbacks. The next page is that's our backyard, showing the deck that is currently in that back corner where we are proposing a screened-in porch and kind of replacing that structure. That is 8 feet from the side property. The next page is me standing on the deck. I just wanted to show you that that is kind of looking into the side of our property, and that is what overlooks into our neighbor's yard. So that is, it's trees, it's foliage, it's open space. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the last page is what the house would look like with the 25-foot setbacks.
Thank you all for your time. The only other last point I would add, I know we're at time, is when we purchased the home, you know, we were not made aware. We had, you know, no knowledge that there were special rules and requirements on the pipe stem lot. We were never told it was a pipe stem. I don't know if that's typical to inform potential buyers of those types of things, but this was not news to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this applicant?
I would just observe that it's the realtor's job to tell you that, and you know, if they don't think if they think it's in their best interest not to do that, no. Anyway,
I guess I think our question was just about the non-conforming. Is there, and I know there are lots of non-conforming lots kind of all over
a
Arlington.
whole lot of the reason we're here every month is because of that, because a lot of Arlington was built before the zoning ordinance even. But in this case, apparently the rules for pipe stems have also changed
an additional time
more recently. Right. And that, you know, that does create a hardship for people who are already living in these houses and want to change them. I like what you're suggesting to do, and I think particularly the placement of your house compared to not your pipe stem neighbor, but the neighbors on the other side and behind. I think there's very minimal impact, especially on your north side neighbor, where their entire house is before yours, basically.
Yes.
So I understand that technically there are a number of requests in your application that don't meet the new standard, but I find it completely reasonable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Bowen, I know you're not going to be able to answer the question, but in this, you know, general neighborhood geographic area, we don't know how many pipe stems there are, right?
No, and Stephen Rissy wrote this report, so he might have done a little more research, and if he's available online, he might be able to have a better sense of how many pipe stem lots are in the area.
There's one on 26 that we've seen more than once, which is not that far away.
Mr. Rissy, are you online?
I am online.
Welcome.
Thanks. I can't give you a hard answer to your question.
I wouldn't expect you would, but like, you know, dozens, hundreds, millions?
Not hundreds or millions. I included as many as I could find plats for in the report though. So it's not a whole lot more than that within the kind of typical 1,000 feet that we look.
Thank you.
I think that's like half a dozen.
I kind of had inferred that there probably weren't a ton in there. I think pipe stems are a really case-by-case basis, and I'm less concerned about setting a precedent for future ones as opposed to this one. And I want to commend you on bringing the pictures, because I think that convinced me. I probably would have been a no without the pictures. So good job.
Thank you.
Would you like to go ahead, Ms. Freshman?
Sorry?
Motion?
I don't have a reference point. So
I will do it.
somebody needs to pull it up or take my place.
I move the alternative resolution in staff report for V-11937-24-UP-1 for approval as advertised.
Second.
A motion made by the chair, seconded by Ms. Freshman for the alternative resolution for approval. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman?
Aye.
Ms. Clark?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for the alternative for passage passes 3-0.
Amazing.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bowen, case number 12, please.
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, the next case on the agenda is case number V-11938-24-UP-1. This is a use permit request by Stephen and Megan Vaughn, the owners, to permit a right side setback of 5.2 feet to the building wall, 3.9 feet to the roof eave instead of 10 feet to the building wall, 6 feet to the roof eave as required, and to permit an aggregate side yard of 15 feet instead of 24 feet as required, for an exterior structural modifications, garage additions, and a second-story addition to an existing one-family attached dwelling in the R10 zoning district on the premises known as 4913 29th Street North within the Yorktown Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. At this time, I'm not aware of any speakers either in support or in opposition to the request, nor do we have any supplemental materials for this case.
Any questions for staff? Let's hear from the applicant before I say anything.
Hello, my name is Stephen Vaughn. I'm the resident and I own the home here at 4913 with my wife. We've owned the home for approximately 11 years. It was our 5-year plan. And now we've got 2 kids. We have a 12-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter. They were out enjoying other Arlington sports programming, but I did want you to get a little picture of what my family looks like at its best moment when we're on vacation together. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is just get some more space. As you could see from the materials in the packet, it's a very small home for the 4 of us. You go to it's a 1-story home. You go to the end of the hallway, you can put 1 foot in each bedroom. It's not working for our family. The world has changed. I'm working from home primarily now, and my corner office is in our basement in the corner of the children's playroom where it's been for about 4 years. So we're just trying to find a way to reasonably expand the amount of space that we have in here for our family. We've realized that these close quarters aren't really conducive to the health of any of us. And so we're hoping to expand by going up. And then the reason that we're primarily here today is because we're seeking some additional space to take our carport and to enclose it into a garage, which is going to require about a 2.5 foot extension of the existing carport on the side. We're coming to the board now with this project versus some other alternatives. We spent about 2 years looking for a new home in Arlington, unsuccessfully, losing bidding war after bidding war. And then we gave consideration to others, more elaborate projects that would require us to demolish the home, do a lot of digging, maybe even go through the LDA process. But that does somewhat offend our sensibilities as we look around Arlington and we look at the homes that are built that are taking up the entirety of the lot, that are moving a lot of dirt, that are killing a lot of trees or removing trees in their entirety. And for us, this is not a dream home, but this is a home that we could live in comfortably with our family through our kids' college years, hopefully. We've had the opportunity to work with the staff to review the report and the recommendations. We have the full support of our neighbors as part of this process, who I tried to actually sit down and talk with each one of the ones that had signed the petition. A couple of the neighbors behind us, we were never able to get to have a conversation, but they did also receive the materials, and I'm not aware of any objections to what we're hoping that we can do here today. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I could go on and on about the family and the reason we want to stay in Arlington. And you might have seen it in the packet when I talked about my son's baseball card, because he's convinced that's what he's going to be. And he wants to say Arlington, Virginia. He doesn't want it to say Vienna. He doesn't want it to be Maryland. He wants us to be able to stay in Arlington. And we do fear, after this 2 years of kind of frustration in trying to manage the budget that we have and living in a nice home and staying in our neighborhood, that we'd probably consider moving out of Arlington, maybe even out of Virginia now that the world has changed a little bit if we had to. But as someone who moved around every couple of years as a child, I don't want to do that to my children. I'd like them to stay with their friends. We'd like to stay with neighbors who we feel are like our family in a home that feels comfortable for us.
Can I ask you a quick question? There's a existing carport in place of this addition?
We have a carport currently.
Right.
The addition would propose a garage.
Right. And do you know how far out from the house does that current carport go? I know you're asking 13.5 feet.
It looks like from the plat there,
Is it on there? I didn't see it.
I would say it's probably 2.5 feet shorter than the 13. And so what our architect had decided is when you tried to use that space, and we've done it during snowstorms, we'll try to put a car under a carport. You can only open one door. On a carport, we can open two, right? Because it's open space on the other side. But we can't, with a smaller footprint, we can't open two car doors. We also took a look at what it would look like with a carport, with a house design. We'd lose a lot of space and it looks awful. I think it would be an eyesore in the neighborhood.
I don't, do colleagues have questions?
Can you describe your outreach effort to the two neighbors in the back, 4908 and 4920?
Yes, I can. It was in the supplemental material or the later added materials. So I just continued to go knock on the doors and nobody would answer. One time I was pretty sure somebody was home. One of the two homes I think has actually recently sold and may not even be occupied. And the other home, we don't see that neighbor there a lot, but it's a sizable property. It's over an acre, I would say, and their house is on the front third of it. So we can't really monitor or observe what their whereabouts are. So I did also leave a letter in the mailboxes. I took pictures as I was putting the letters in the mailboxes. And that was the staff's encouragement to try it that way.
I'm happy to start us off. I was kind of wishy-washy on this one coming into it because I didn't particularly like the comps that the county had identified, and you're pretty close to the minimum, and your ask is for a two-story, but I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I can also, if you're talking about the setbacks, I can speak to that a little bit because it's kind of wild when you look at the map. You can see visually on the map, and we provided some measurements in an email county after having the benefit of talking to Stephen on Friday. The setbacks in the chart don't actually match the existing conditions. And 4906 is a great example where it says that's an 8.5 foot setback on what would be its right side. It's not. It's about 4 feet from the property line. So we thought, hey, that's a great example for us. We're not asking to be that close. And so when you think about that, and then when you think about 4918, which is directly across from us in over one, the setback on the side there is 5.1. And by the way, that's not a carport there. That's the side of the house. That was a house that was remodeled before we moved in. And so I feel like we are very well aligned with what's going on in our neighborhood. We're not asking for quite as much as some of them.
So I'm happy to support this one if my colleagues are in agreement. Someone? Me? I can do it. I hear something.
Oh, thank you. Here's the motion.
Oh, okay. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit V-11938-24-UP-1, subject to the conditions listed.
Second.
A motion for approval made by Ms. Clark, seconded by Ms. Freshman. Hearing no further discussion, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Passes 3-0. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your service. And thank you to the staff as well.
Mr. Bowen, can you please call the last case we have not heard yet?
Yes, Mr. Kaplan, I'll just briefly note that the next two cases listed on the agenda, case number V-11939-24-VA-1, as well as, oh wait, is that only the one? Oh yeah, as well as case number V-11940-24-VA-1 were approved in a group motion at the start of the hearing, which brings us to case number V-11941-23-UP-1, a use permit request by Brad Zombro on behalf of David and Catherine Leonard, the owners, to permit a rear setback of 8.5 feet to the accessory structure, 8 feet to the accessory structure eve instead of 25 feet to the accessory structure, 21 feet to the accessory structure eaves as required, regarding a new unenclosed accessory structure, an outdoor kitchen, to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R10 zoning district on the premises known as 1401 21st Street South within the Arlington Ridge Civic Association. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit, subject to the conditions listed. We do not have any speakers who have signed up to speak on this case, nor do we have any supplemental materials at this time.
Mr. Bowen, am I correct that we don't, I'm not missing it, we don't have any neighborhood outreach on this case?
I do not believe we did, no.
I guess the applicant can speak to his neighborhood outreach, but this board typically would not approve something like this without neighborhood outreach that helps us establish compatibility with the neighborhood, which is required by the Arlington County zoning ordinance for us to make that determination. The applicant would like to address that.
Yes, I'm the applicant, Brad Zombo.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing our case. We did send a letter to the neighbors. We did not hear any negative complaints or any feedback, so we considered with the proposals.
Is there anything else you'd want to talk about your proposal?
I'm sure if you have any questions, I think the owner is online as well. Kate Leonard, if you have any questions for her, we're available.
I would just add that we weren't aware that neighbors needed to submit letters of support or reach out to the county to approve this. They did text us and speak to us personally that they were excited about us adding an outdoor kitchen, given that the neighborhood does do a lot of get-togethers, and our home is a little bit difficult to host neighborhood get-togethers, given the size of our kitchen and the layout of our home. And so part of the reason we're constructing this is so that we can participate in the events that typically take place on our cul-de-sac. But we don't have any, written letters of support that I'm aware of.
Discussion with the board.
So that is typically in the application and mentioned by staff as well.
And followed up from our assistant to the BZA.
From our assistant, yes.
So you should have received an email from our assistant, Patty Petrosini, requesting neighborhood outreach, which I know that she diligently follows up with our applicants about regularly.
It is part of the original application as well.
And I think it's on the application. There's a checkbox that says
yes.
I've done neighborhood outreach.
Yes, I think a copy of the letter that was sent to the neighbors is included in the packet.
Well, it isn't the letter that's the issue. It's the response.
I understand.
Right, and so this is a fairly big project in the backyard, and so we at the minimum want to see. We typically ask for neighbors all around. In this case, particularly the 1322 and 1318, who are going to be directly impacted from the rear of their house.
It's really just 4 properties, 1 on each side and 2 behind, that should sign off on it.
That helps us gauge compatibility, especially with something like this there's not a lot of outdoor kitchens in the area for compatibility. So compatibility in this case is really difficult for this board to make a determination or a finding about, which is required under Virginia and Arlington code. Unfortunately, I would have to, I don't think I could support it. And so I don't know where my colleagues are, if they would be willing to support this one without neighborhood outreach, but I would support a deferral till May so that this applicant can have discussions with their neighbors about it. I think, and I know we've already deferred a couple, but I think June has potential to be a lot worse with at least the appeal, not knowing what other cases are coming in.
Yeah, I think it's only 4. They really only need 4. So that's not a heavy lift. I would, in the case of V-11941-23-UP1, I would defer to May 15 for purposes of getting 4 neighbors' feedback support.
I will second that. A motion for deferral to May 15th, made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by the chair. Hearing no further discussion, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman? Clark?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Matters deferred until May. I know not what you'd want, but I think we need that, especially for something we don't see in this neighborhood a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Trash, no.
Are we ready to move a minutes approval?
Before you do that, I'll just quickly note that the final case on the agenda tonight, case number V-11942-24-UP-1 was moved to the start of the hearing agenda and approved at the beginning of the hearing.
Thank you.
That we approve the minutes or any discussion of March 13th.
I will second that. Motion to move approval of the March 13th minutes by Ms. Clark, seconded by the chair. Hearing no further discussion, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman. Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Minutes are approved 3-0. All business before us being heard, this meeting is adjourned.